Okay, so everything we're doing is Christmas themed, of course. So even the Wednesday nights, like tonight, Christmas focused things. I think it was last year we did alleged contradictions in the Easter stories, everything from the arrest straight on through the ascension and all the supposed contradictions and errors in that. And so I thought, well, hey, let's do that with the Christmas narratives, the birth narratives. And so that's what we're going to get into today. And then we'll also touch on it. It will be 2 weeks. So we'll start today, end next week. And then the week after that, what's that? Just talk faster. So for 2 weeks, we'll be talking contradictions. And then the third week in December, it will be the whole controversy over Christmas being a pagan holiday and our traditions having, pagan and idolatrous roots and all that fun stuff. And so we'll dig into that. Some of it may be true. Some of it may be false. We shall see. So what I want to do tonight, we're going to go through some supposed contradictions and errors and mistakes that are found in the early parts of the Gospels. So we should always be willing to wrestle through doubts. We should always be willing to seek. And one of the big areas where people do find challenges is supposed errors or contradictions or, things like that in the Bible. I mean, because if the Bible is not trustworthy, Christianity kind of goes kaput, right? Because that's where you learn about Jesus. And so that's an area of attack. It's an area that we will often focus on. So we need to be able to wrestle through those things. So here's what we're going to do. I've taken all of the issues that we're going to address and I'll divide them into 3 sections. The first one, which we're going to start with tonight, has to do with the genealogies. Those areas that are so much fun, those parts in the Bible that we all just love to just read over and over again because they're so exciting, right? Which I always find funny because if skeptics or atheists are finding errors in the genealogies, that means they're actually reading them, and it's like they care enough about the Bible that they so want to find something wrong that they dig into the most boring parts. But we're going to look at the genealogies, and then we'll get into what are contradictions in details, where this part of the story says this and this part of the story says that, and those two don't match. And then the third part is historical or other kind of factual errors, right? Not a contradiction within the Bible, but an error, something where they'll say historically that did not happen or that kind of thing. But that we'll get into definitely next week. Tonight we're going to start off looking at the genealogies. So one thing we have to understand, since we're talking about genealogies, immediately right off the bat, it looks like we are contradicting the Bible because in 1 Timothy chapter 1, it says, do not heed fables and genealogies. So wait a minute. Why does the Bible have genealogies when the Bible tells you not to worry about genealogies? In Titus 3:9, it also says to avoid foolish genealogies. So, oh no. Is that a contradiction? Because you got Paul saying stay away from genealogies, but you got Matthew and Luke giving genealogies. What do we do? Well, I think we're misunderstanding, if that's where we go with that, we're misunderstanding what Timothy, or what Paul is writing to Timothy. So he says, don't give heed to fables and endless genealogies. And of course, you always want the context. Let's read the rest of the verse, where it says, these things cause disputes rather than godly edification, which is in faith. And so the issue here doesn't seem to be about genealogy necessarily, but there's an issue about things causing disputes rather than building up other believers. And he goes on, the reason of giving this command, the purpose, he's telling Timothy this, is to love from a pure heart, from a good conscience, and from sincere faith, from which some, having strayed, have turned aside to idle talk, desiring to be teachers of the law, understanding neither what they say nor the things which they affirm. And so he's not just saying, stay away from genealogies. Genealogies are bad. Right? He goes into this whole thing about, you don't want to disrupt, you don't want to be divisive, you want to be edifying, you want there to be love, you want there to be sincere faith, right? All of these things, and you don't want to be idle talk from ignorance. And I think that gets us to what the real issue that he's talking about here, which is your attitude. Is your attitude coming from a place of faith, a place of love, right? A place of good conscience? Or is it, disruptive, divisive? Is it trying to build yourself up? Are you trying to, I want to be a teacher, right? He says, these people, they desire to be teachers of the law, right? Everybody, and honestly, as a pastor, I'm going to go and tell you, not an easy place to be. So it's interesting whenever people are like, I want to be that. Okay. Yeah. But you see, I want to be the guy in authority. I want to be the guy people listening to. Listen to me. I'm so important. And so the issue is attitude. Is it an attitude of disruption, or is it an attitude of edification? Or is the issue of ignorance? Because you can hide a whole lot of ignorance getting buried in the minute details of something like arguing about genealogies. I think we see much the same thing in Titus 3:9. Says, avoid foolish genealogies, for they are unprofitable and useless. And of course, and this is, as I said, I took these straight off of skeptics and what they, are putting forth. And so this is exactly how they quoted it. As I'm sure we all know, whenever you see those three little dots, that means there was something else there that they edited out. Usually just to save space, it was unimportant stuff, so they just kind of cut it out to get to the main point. Well, but was it? So what is in those gaps? Actually quite a bit. Avoid foolish genealogies. Excuse me. Avoid foolish disputes, genealogies, contentions, and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and useless. Reject a divisive man after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a person is warped and sinning, being self-condemned. So when you look at the things that are actually being focused on, genealogy isn't the focus. The focus is foolish issues on people who are being unprofitable, issues that are useless, not of profit, people who are being divisive, they're being sinful, they're self-condemning. Right? The idea here is much the same as he was saying to Timothy, that it's people who are being disruptive, they're being divisive, and genealogies are a way that people will argue about that, to get way off into the nitpicky stuff. However, I actually don't even think that 1 Timothy and Titus here are talking about the genealogies of Jesus. I think that they're actually talking about the genealogies of people, about arguing about, my dad, my granddad, he was a high priest. Yeah, I'm awesome, right? Quit arguing about genealogy. Don't argue about your own genealogies. And the reason I kind of mention that, and why I think that, is because we see that that's kind of part of the cultural attitude back then. Paul, in Philippians 3:5, whenever he's giving his credentials, I'm an apostle. He's saying, I could come in with all the authority of my credentials. And he starts rattling off his credentials, one of which he says, of the tribe of Benjamin. Why would that be important, that he's of the tribe of Benjamin? Well, because if you go back and you look at when the kingdom split, Judah and Benjamin were the two tribes that were staying faithful to God through, the proper king, through the proper son of David, and the northern kingdom split off. And what's interesting, if you look, the northern kingdom, they never had a godly king. They never followed God ever again. The southern kingdom had their good and bad. So being of the tribe of Benjamin was, of the Israelites, you were kind of on the more godly team, right? So it had that clout, it had that reputation. Right? I'm not one of those people up there from that northern tribes. No, I'm a Benjaminite. And so this idea of arguing about their own genealogies, I think that's what he's talking about. Saying your big shot ancestors don't matter. It doesn't matter where your lineage was. The lineage that matters is Jesus' lineage. That was the whole point, right? So the reason Matthew and Luke include genealogies is because the Messiah is prophesied to come from specific lineage. And so they're showing, hey, look, Jesus is from that lineage. And so That, I think, is how I would think about that. So, about to launch into looking at differences between the genealogies in the Gospels and then what it says in the Old Testament. Because don't you know those crazy gospel writers, they didn't know their stuff. They got it wrong, right? They leave names out. They skip over things. They get things wrong. It's just the genealogies in the Gospels just don't match what's in the Old Testament. And so, well, let's take a look. First question that came up that I saw, does Jeconiah have any sons? There's a guy named Jeconiah who is in the lineage and the ancestry of Jesus. In Matthew 1:11, it says that Jeconiah beget Shealtiel, if I pronounced that right. However, in Jeremiah 22, verse 30, thus saith the Lord, write this man, and it's referring to Jeconiah. That's in brackets because in Jeremiah it's actually spelt different, but it's referring to the same person. It says, write this man childless. No man of his seed shall prosper, sitting on the throne of David and ruling anymore in Judah. So right there, thus saith the Lord, make this man childless. Oh, wow. Okay, curse from God, not going to be kids. So does he have kids or doesn't he? Well, always remember, context. You have to read the context. Look at what is going on in the verse, because if you back up just 2 verses, verse 28, it says, is this man, Jeconiah, a despised broken idol? Is he a vessel wherein is no pleasure? Wherefore are they cast out? He and his seed, there be his children, and are cast into a land which they know not. Okay, so it's talking about the exile. They're going to be sent to the exile. But who's the they? If he doesn't have children, how is it casting out him and his children? I mean, just 2 verses earlier, it's saying he's got kids, but then we're supposed to think that verse 30 means he doesn't have kids? Okay, that seems kind of weird. And most translations are actually going to say, make him as if he is childless. The convenient one that says, write this man as childless, that's the King James Version. Most of your newer English translations are going to say as if childless. And that's showing the idea here isn't that he will have no children, but rather that his seed shall prosper, that none of his seed shall prosper sitting on the throne. So the point isn't that he won't actually physically have any kids. The point is cutting off his lineage from sitting on the throne. And so the whole thing, there's not a contradiction where Matthew says he had this son. Jeremiah is not saying he had no sons. He's saying that there was a curse that his sons wouldn't be allowed to be king. Which brings up another interesting thought. Well, if his children aren't supposed to be king, then how is it that Jesus, as his descendant, can be in the line of David? As a descendant of Jeconiah, if Jeconiah is under this curse. Interestingly enough, there's 2 answers there. Right there, and I didn't include this. This was something that kind of came up last minute, and I didn't have time to edit the presentation. But right there in that little ellipsis after childless, the phrase that's missing is in his days, that he will be made childless in his days. No man of his seed shall prosper sitting on the throne. So the argument could be that it's none of his immediate sons, that within his lifetime, none of his children would get to be king. That's one way to think of it. Also in Haggai 2:23, we actually see God blessing Zerubbabel, which is the grandson, I believe, of Jeconiah. And so Jewish kind of teachings, rabbis have said that this, because the wording of the blessing that God gives him mirrors the curse that God gave Jeconiah. So this is a kind of a reinstatement, right? That Jeconiah was wicked, but here his descendant is being honoring to God, so he's reversing the curse that was placed upon Jeconiah. So whichever way that's understood, either one, it was just referring to his immediate children, or two, the curse was overturned. Either way, no problem for Jesus being in his lineage, having claim to the throne of David. So there's that. And of course, at any time, if you wish, just, ask a question, raise a hand, throw something at me. We'll just ask that James please not speak.
It's a redemption story, right?
Right there, redemption story in his lineage. Okay, so we mentioned Zerubbabel. So who was Zerubbabel's father? Probably not even pronouncing that right. In Matthew 1:12, it says, and after they were brought to Babylon, Jeconiah begot Shealtiel, and Shealtiel begot Zerubbabel. Oh, there we go. That's an easy one. Shealtiel, that's Zerubbabel's dad. Well, not so fast. Oh, Luke agrees right there. However, those silly gospel authors, they didn't know their Old Testament. In 1 Chronicles 3:19, we have the sons of Pedaiah were Zerubbabel and Shimei. Now, wait a minute. So is Zerubbabel the son of Pedaiah or the son of Shealtiel? Which one is it? As always, you need the context. If you just back up a few verses, you actually see that in Chronicles 3:17 and 18, that Shealtiel and Pedaiah were brothers. Right? It says the sons of Jeconiah, the captive, so going off into Babylon, Shealtiel, his son, Malkaram, Pedaiah, Shanazar, Jechemiah, Hoshama, and Nedabiah. So there were his sons. And so we notice here, oh, look, there's Shealtiel and Pedaiah. They're both mentioned. So which one was Zerubbabel's father? Okay, here's the important things. And this is where it's one of those things where the cultural thing's going to go, ooh, really? So Shealtiel and Pedaiah are brothers. Notice that Shealtiel is the firstborn. Why is that important? What's important about the firstborn? They inherit. They carry on the line. They carry on the name. Well, but who does the genealogy there in Chronicles actually show that the line goes through? Family line traces through Pedaiah. Okay. Here's what's going on, I believe, in this situation. We have what is called a Levirate marriage. That word Levirate comes from the Latin levir, which means brother-in-law. Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 and 6 says, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside of the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of his dead brother, that this name may not be blotted out of Israel. So, for those of you who are visual learners, Jeconiah had two sons, Shealtiel and Pedaiah. Shealtiel had a wife. Shealtiel dies. So Pedaiah, being the good brother he is, takes Shealtiel's widow as his own wife, and they have a son named Zerubbabel. However, even though he is biologically the son of Pedaiah, legally he is the son of Shealtiel, carry on his lineage. So when we ask who's his father, Pedaiah or Shealtiel, well, Pedaiah is the biological father, and Shealtiel is the legal lineage. So technically, it could both be right if that is what was going on in the situation. Granted, that's a little speculation, but in order for something to be a contradiction, it has to be an impossibility. Right? Whenever we talk about contradictions, a contradiction is something like a square circle. Can't possibly exist. Right? This is a possibility. It's possible that you don't have a contradiction, that Matthew and Luke are right, and First Chronicles is right. They're both right. Both of them, in some sense, in the Israel culture, are considered his father. Then you have these issues of whether or not a certain person is somebody's father or their grandfather. So we have, again, we're hanging around Jeconiah's family. I don't know why all the shenanigans are going on with this family. Was Jeconiah the son or the grandson of Josiah? Matthew 1:11, Josiah beget Jeconiah. Okay, so there you go. Josiah, father of Jeconiah. However, 1 Chronicles, that pesky genealogy there, Josiah is actually the father of Jehoiakim, who is the father of Jeconiah. So is it dad or granddad? Which one is it? How about Uzziah? Who is Uzziah's father? Matthew 1:8 says that Joram beget Uzziah. Okay, well, 1 Chronicles 3 says that Joram beget, oh my goodness, these names. Joram beget Ahaziah, who beget Joash, who beget Amaziah, who beget Azariah, and Azariah is another name for Uzziah. It's just different ways that they spell things and do things. It's the same name. So, which one is it? Is Joram Uzziah's father or his great-great-grandfather? Here's the thing. When it comes to fathers and grandfathers, in the Hebrew language and in that culture, it was actually perfectly normal for father just to refer to any ancestor. Any male ancestor was father. Song about that. Father Abraham, he had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right arm, Father Abraham. Right? And calling someone a son is just a descendant of. And so we even see that in the Gospels, where the Pharisees are like, our father is Abraham. Well, no, he'd be your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. But so there is no thing. So whenever you see in the genealogies that they kind of skip some generations, so-and-so was the father of so-and-so, well, that's not wrong. They're just, for whatever reason, skipping some. And we'll take a little bit of a look at that. We see where things do not match between the two genealogies. Actually, first, let's take a look at this. King David, how far was from King David to the Babylonian exile? Because in Matthew, his genealogy says, that there were 14 generations, but 1 Chronicles 3, there are 18 generations. Right? And you probably can't read those. It's not important that you read the names, but just for the visual that, hey, look, there's gaps. But what did we just say? That the gaps are okay. Saying that so-and-so was the father of so-and-so, it still works because they were in the lineage of. And oftentimes what we'll see is that they give numbers are important in the Bible. There's a lot of symbology in numbers. And so especially I think it is Matthew who does his genealogy in 3 sets of 14. Well, why? Because there's something about 14 that has a special symbolic meaning, and so he's doing that on purpose, so he takes out some generations to make the number, count, but he might be inaccurate, he may be imprecise, but he's not factually wrong because someone being the father of or the descendant of, son of, linguistically it all works. There is no factual issue there. So, all these things that Matthew and Luke don't have in common. What are these guys doing, right? 2 different genealogies. We appear there are 29 generations listed in Matthew's genealogy, 43 generations listed in Luke's. There we go. We don't know who of David's sons does Jesus come through. Is it Solomon from Matthew 1 records, or is it Nathan as Luke 3 records? Who is Joseph's dad? Is it Jacob, as Matthew says, or is it Heli, as Luke says? The fact is, these genealogies don't match. They're not supposed to match. They are actually completely different genealogies. So why is it that they go from David to Joseph through completely different lines? How can that claim be made? Why would we have that? There's actually a few explanations that historians have brought up throughout the years. The traditional one is that Luke is giving you Mary's genealogy and Matthew is giving you Joseph's genealogy. The important kind of thing there is that in Mary's genealogy, you're getting that physical relation to David, right? The Messiah is the son of David. He's actually got to be in the lineage of David. So here he has that physical relationship through his mother. But then through Joseph, who is descended through Solomon, right? And Solomon was the rightful descendant, the rightful heir. And so you actually have that connection through the royal lineage, kind of claim to the throne sort of lineage. And even if you'd be like, well, but Joseph isn't his real dad, time out, stop right there. Anyone who has adopted kids knows you are their real parent. And especially, and not just emotionally, right? We talk about that emotionally where it's like, well, you are my son, you are my mom, you are my dad, whoever those other people were biologically, whatever, you're my parents. Legally, in all aspects of the culture and legality in ancient Israel, being adopted absolutely 100% is sonship. So Jesus being basically adopted by Joseph, being the son of Joseph, even though not physically, biologically from Joseph, is every bit 100% the son of Joseph as if he had been fathered by him. And so there's no issue there. Okay. Then there's the son-in-law view. So people say, okay, well, in the Greek, there is no word for son-in-law. There's just the son. Right? That's how they would describe it. You wouldn't have any term to say, you're my son-in-law. You're my son. So technically, Joseph is the son of Heli. So whenever it says, here's the lineage of Mary, right? And then Heli, and Joseph is the son of Heli. Well, he's a son-in-law. There wouldn't actually be, linguistically, there wasn't a determination between that. But further, someone said, well, it doesn't appear that Mary has any brothers. You actually look into Scripture, I believe it's in John 19:25. It mentions Mary's sisters, but she's got some female siblings. We don't see any indication that she had brothers. She could have, and they just weren't mentioned, but some have said, well, Mary didn't have any brothers, and so there wasn't anyone to carry on the line, and so she married Joseph, and so Joseph would have taken on kind of the family headship role from Heli. So he, in reality, would have been the son of Heli, taking over Heli's family as his heir. And so there is that view as well. Then there's this one, and we get back to the fun issue of levirate marriage. How is it that Joseph can be the son of both Jacob and Heli? We're going to take a look at just these couple generations right before Joseph. Now, this isn't some wild speculation. This isn't something I just thought up. This actually comes from church historian Eusebius, right? Eusebius, who is from the Council of Nicaea fame. He was one of the big guys going on at the Council of Nicaea. A lot of what we have from church history of that period is from him. And so he records this, that here's what was going on, right? So there you got the genealogy. You got Matthew coming down through Mathan, Jacob to Joseph. But through Luke, you got Mathat to Heli to Joseph. So Mathan and Mathat, they're just two guys, probably live in the same town, probably, around the corner from each other or whatever. Well, here is the idea of how it would work out, that Joseph is actually the son of both Jacob and Heli. Mathan gets a wife, and they have a son, Jacob, okay? But unfortunately, Mathan dies. It's what happened back then. It was a dangerous world, and they didn't have medicine, so you don't live long. So she is free to remarry. She's a widow, but it wasn't, through anything. It was natural death. She's now free by law to go get remarried. She marries Mathat. And her and Mathat have Heli. So you have Jacob and Heli now, who are brothers, half-brothers through their mom, but they're brothers. And so you have Heli finds himself a wife. But again, first century, Israel, not the safest place. So Heli kicks the bucket. So Jacob, being the good brother he is, takes his brother's widow, and they have a son, Joseph. Okay, but because it is Heli's widow, Joseph is legally of the lineage of Heli, thus making Joseph the son of both Jacob and Heli. Again, kind of speculation. I don't know what Eusebius's sources may have been, but this is a view that has been promulgated out there in the church throughout history. I mean, going back to Council of Nicaea, that was 4th century. So is it's possible? Can we prove it? No. Traditional view works just fine. Son-in-law view works just fine. Is this possible? Yes, it's possible. But there's 3 ways that we can actually make sense of the 2 different genealogies that are found in Matthew and Luke, and why they're not a contradiction. There's not a problem. There's not an issue. Questions? You're not my father. Yeah. Who's your daddy? That's what I should have titled that one. Yeah. Who's your daddy? Okay. Again, there's probably more things about the genealogies that could probably be asked. Those are the issues that I found that were being directly pointed at by skeptics to say, look, the Bible has an error. The Bible has a contradiction. And as we see, actually, no. None of those were contradictions. So now some alleged contradictory details of some things going on in the birth narratives. And we'll get through a few of these, and then we'll pick up some more next week along with the historical claims of historical and factual errors. I like this one. This one kind of tells you that they're really grasping at it. Why didn't Mary tell Joseph? Right, because if you think about it, in Luke chapter 1, verse 35, the angel appears to Mary. And the angel says, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. And so the Holy One to be born will be called Son of God. If you notice, it's all future tense things. It hasn't happened yet. The angel is coming and telling her this will happen. You're going to have a son. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, right? However, in Matthew's gospel, whenever he tells of Joseph, he just kind of flies right past that part, about Mary getting told by the angel. Just kind of says that it happened and then moves on to Joseph. Matthew 1:18 says, before they came together, she was found with child. Then Joseph, her husband, was minded to put her away secretly. Now, here's the thing. If you find out someone's pregnant, how far along do they have to be for you to go, wait a minute, they're pregnant, right? To be found with child, you're talking they got to be a few months along. So if she knew back before it happened, why didn't she tell him? That's just weird, like text him, get on Facebook, Instagram, something. I don't know. Let him know. Right? I have 2 answers to this that are actually, whenever I read this, this was the kind of thing where I'm like, you guys are really, really grasping at straws. Because it shows that they're kind of anachronistically taking our cultural mindset and reading it back into a 1st century Israelite marriage situation. Okay, we date, we know each other, we're friends, we're around each other, we hang out and all that kind of stuff. Back then, a lot of times it was probably arranged. Right? They may not even live in the same town. So, I don't even know that they would even be around each other to tell one another. So why would we assume that she would have had the opportunity to tell Joseph? But then also, and this actually occurred to me like just about an hour ago, what does Mary do immediately after she learns that this is going to happen? she runs off to go visit Elizabeth and stays there how long? Until Elizabeth comes to term, or very close. I think it's like 6 months that she stays. Okay, so Joseph is up in Nazareth, or over in Bethlehem, or whichever. That's another thing we'll actually talk about. Where did they live before? Did they live in Nazareth? Did they live in Bethlehem? So Joseph is off in his hometown. Meanwhile, Mary is down in Jerusalem with Elizabeth for 6 months. So they're not even in the same towns. How's she telling him anything? So then I guess she comes back and is found to be with child, right? And so again, they're grasping at straws to find some kind of error, it seems to me. And yet more example of the links they will go through. That is really small on the screen, I'm sorry. Who is the most blessed woman? Apparently there are 3 people in the Bible who are given that title of being the most blessed woman. There is Mary in Luke chapter 1. The angel comes to her and says, "Hail, thou art highly favored, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women." However, in Judges 5, which is one of my favorite stories, there is a woman named Jael, which I'm probably mispronouncing that. It says, "Blessed above women shall Jael be, blessed shall she be above women." What's really fun is her claim to fame is that the general of the enemy army, or the king or whatever, kind of took shelter in her tent. And she was like, "Oh, you poor thing, here, come in, have something to eat. Here, have some warm milk, lay down, take a nap," and then drove a tent spike through his head while he was asleep. And this is why she is blessed among women, because she killed the enemy king. And then third, Judith, it said, "Blessed art thou above all women upon the earth. The Lord directed thee to cutting off the head. Praise shall not depart out of the mouth of men forever." Okay. You might think, who's Judith and when did that happen? Well, the verse reference that is attached to this is actually an apocryphal book, Judith 13, 23, and 25. That book is not in the Bible. So we're not dealing with a biblical contradiction where, God said this woman's blessed and this one, because Judith isn't even in the Bible. So I'm just going to not waste time on that and just scratch it off the list, because, again, skeptics looking for whatever way they can to find some error with the Bible. Judith, not in the Bible. So we're not going to look at her. Let's take a look at Jael. She's fun. I like that story. Probably shouldn't. That's terrible. What does that say about me? That's one of my favorite stories. Lull him to sleep and put a spike through his head. I need help. Okay. "Blessed above women shall Jael be. Blessed shall she be above women." Okay. But what do we see there? Oh, looky there. Some little dots, meaning some information is missing. Wonder what fills in those gaps. Well, the first one is nothing. They just identifying who she is, that she is the wife of Heber the Kenite. Okay. So blessed be the woman who's the wife of Heber. Blessed shall she be above women. What goes there? That might be pretty important. In the tent. Blessed is she above women in the tent. What does that "in the tent" mean? What's that referring to? I can only speculate, but I think it's, it could be referring to the tabernacle. This is during the time of the judges. There is no temple. The temple has not been built. They still have the tabernacle from the wilderness wandering. So it's a tent of meeting. So blessed is she in the tent. So in the gathering, basically all that's saying, that she'll have blessing and good reputation among women at church. That doesn't mean all women everywhere of all time that she's the most blessed woman. So there would be no contradiction. What's this saying about Mary? The angel came into her and said, "Hail, thou art highly favored, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women." Seems to be focusing on this phrase right here. But even that phrase doesn't say, "Blessed art thou above all women, most blessed art thou." Actually, what's interesting is, in most Bibles, that's not in there. In most of your newer translations, you'll find that. And even whenever you do have it, there'll probably be a footnote that will tell you that in the earliest manuscripts, that line is missing. So even if it was trying to say she's blessed among women, well, that didn't necessarily mean that was really in the Bible to begin with. But even if it was, it doesn't say that she's being most blessed above all women. So basically it's saying the same thing as the line above it. You're just highly favored. Kudos to you. So we have three things here. One wasn't even from the Bible, and neither one of the other two are even making the claim that it's saying is the supposed contradiction. But at least we know that Mary was blessed, right? She was Mary, the mother of Jesus, so she was blessed. Or was she? Because there we have in Luke where the angel was telling her, you are blessed. But then we have this part in Luke later on in chapter 11 where it says, a certain woman of the company, so there's a group, there's people, there's another woman there who lifts up her voice and says to Jesus, blessed is the womb that bare thee and the paps which thou hast sucked. But he said, yea, rather, blessed are they that hear the word of God and keep it. So she's saying, blessed be your mother. And Jesus says, no, blessed are those who hear the word of God and keep it. So the claim here is that in Luke 1, it's saying that Mary is blessed. But then in Luke 11, Jesus is saying, no, she's not blessed. The people who are blessed are the ones who follow God. A few things that I kind of look at here. One, look at what's going on. Okay, and one, the messenger who's telling Mary that she's blessed is Gabriel, an angel sent by God delivering a message, versus some stranger on the street going, your mom's blessed. And here's the thing. Jesus didn't actually negate what she said. Whenever she said, blessed be, your mom, Jesus didn't go, no, she's not. That wasn't what he said. Actually, what he does is he pivots and he changes subjects. Because, it's like, okay, nice thing to say about mom, but here's the point you really need to get. Not that she's blessed. Rather, the people who are blessed are the ones who are honoring God. And actually, what we see going on here is equivocation. It's a logical fallacy where one word can have multiple meanings, and you misuse that word with different meanings in order to bring about a particular argument. And so what is being talked about in Luke 1 as far as being blessed and what's being talked about in Luke 11 as far as being blessed are different things, but this person's taking them and putting them at odds with each other so that there's some kind of supposed contradiction when in reality they're not even talking about the same thing. So no contradiction there. Oh. Okay. Well, you told me to talk fast. That is what I had for tonight. There's some more that we will get to next week, and then we'll launch into the historical errors, supposed historical errors. Like, did Herod really kill all the babies in Bethlehem? Or, a star that moves. Isn't that crazy? So there's some fun things in there. Or the big one that everybody always wants to ask about, the census during the time of Quirinius. They go, historically, that didn't, well, we'll see. We'll take a look at that. That'll be next week.